Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue
Good
dans le
morning,
cadre de
everyone. Very
ce
welcome to
webinaire.
this
C'est vraiment
webinar. This is the
le
last
dernier
one
avant le
before
final de la chaire
the
d'excellence
end of
Normandie
our
pour la
webinars
paix.
for Share
Aujourd'hui,
Normandie
nous
for Peace.
avons
Today, it's a great
l'honneur et
pleasure, a
le
great
plaisir de
privilege
recevoir le
to have
professeur
with us
Gilles-Eric
Gilles-Eric
Serralini
Professor Serralini,
pour
for
un
this
webinaire
webinar,
intitulé La
which
paix
is
avec la
Peace with the
biosphère, les
Biosphere
forces scientifiques,
and our
politiques,
political,
juridiques,
scientific, and
contraires.
legal
Alors, nous allons
powers
plonger dans un
against.
univers assez
So,
particulier.
first
Au
of all, I would
préalable, je
like
souhaite
to
vous
introduce
présenter
Gilles-Eric
Gilles-Eric
Serralini, who is
Serralini,
a
qui est biologiste,
biologist, and he has
professeur en
been
toxicologie à
teaching, a
l'Université
professor
de
of
Caen,
toxicology at the
en
University of
France, en
Caen.
Normandie.
He's an
C'est un
international
chercheur de
researcher
renommée
and author
internationale
on the
et
effects
auteur
of
sur les
pollution
effets
on
de la
health.
pollution sur la santé.
Specifically, has
Il a
demonstrated
démontré
the
la
hidden and
toxicité
major
spécialement
toxicity
cachée
of
et
GMOs and
majeure des
also
organismes génétiquement
pesticides.
modifiés et des
So his
pesticides.
books have
C'est ainsi
been
qu'il a écrit des
translated
livres qui
into
sont
many,
traduits
many
en de nombreuses
languages.
langues, pour en
We
citer
have, for
quelques-uns,
example,
quelques-unes plutôt,
Spanish,
excusez-moi. Il y a
English,
l'espagnol,
German,
anglais, allemand,
Chinese,
chinois, japonais,
Japanese, and
indien.
Indian,
Et
and
notamment, parmi
including
les derniers
in
ouvrages
these
publiés,
last
l'affaire Roundup,
publications, we
la
have
mère des
the
Monsanto-Papers,
roundup
qu'il a coécrit
affair
avec Jérôme
about
Douzelet,
the Monsanto
publié aux
papers,
éditions
co-written with
Actes
Jérôme
Il faut
Douzelet.
savoir que Gilles-Éric
First of
Serralini, en
all,
tant que
as a
biologiste, a
biologist,
servi
he has
auprès de 18
served as an
ministres
expert
français en
for
tant
18
qu'expert.
ministers, many
Il a
foreign
également
officials,
apporté son
international agencies,
expertise auprès
including
beaucoup
EFSI, European Food
d'officialités
Safety
étrangères,
Agency,
des
and the
agences
French National
internationales
Food
comme
Safety
l'Agence européenne
Agency.
pour la sécurité alimentaire ainsi que pour l'Agence française nationale de sécurité alimentaire.
So he
Il a
has
également servi
also been
d'expert
an
dans les grands
expert in
procès
big
américains,
American
dernièrement gagnés contre
processes and
L'Oréal.
cases.
Alors, les
So the
Monsanto-Papers
Monsanto
marquent une
papers,
époque
I
d'évolution
mean,
très
he obtained
particulière, d'où
through
le
the
titre
court
de notre
revealed the
webinaire.
lobbies
Il les a
highly
obtenus en
abnormal against
justice
him,
et ces Monsanto-Papers
noble
ont
actions
révélé
against
des
him, sorry,
actions
but they're
anormales
still trying
de
to
lobbying
alter his public
contre une
profile as much as
personne,
they
un
can, as they are
scientifique, qui
coordinating
cherche
these net
à
pressure
faire
tactics
voix
and
aussi des lanceurs d'alerte. Souvent, son
very
profil
often
public
his
fait l'objet
said
de modifications, c'est ce que j'appelle
public
d'identité de marque.
profile has
Il
been
a
modified,
également souffert
and
de
he
beaucoup de
also
pression,
suffered from
mais vous pouvez
pressures, and
suivre
you can
ses actualités
follow
sur son site
all these
internet.
articles
Il faut
on
savoir qu'il a
his
remporté 7 procès en
website,
diffamation, donc ce dont on va parler aujourd'hui par rapport
www.seralini.fr,
aux dynamiques d'intérêt
and
contraire est une
also, as
réalité
said,
décrite pour un seul homme qui porte
he
beaucoup.
has on
Donc, 7
September
procès en
1st, new
diffamation
hearing
contre
will take
différents
place
lobbies
for
entre 2011
defamation.
et 2017
And
l'ont
that
tous
was, I mean, he
remporté.
won
J'insiste bien sur le
7
fait qu'il les a tous
suits
remportés.
against various lobbies between
Prochainement, le 1er
2011
septembre, il
and
aura une nouvelle
2017.
audience pour un
So
procès
this new
similaire. C'est
hearing
dire si
is
c'est un
similar on the
combat
1st of
de chaque
September.
instant.
So each
Je prononce
time,
très bien le
we
défenseur de
have to
l'environnement.
always
Alors, ce
wonder
webinaire,
about the same
il
issues.
a
So
pour
this webinar
objectif,
has
toujours
here
dans
the objective
le
to
message général de la
diffuse
chaire d'excellence
uh,
CNRS Normandie pour
all
la paix qui
these
porte sur la
messages. And
paix
of
avec
course,
la
we have
terre et
here
la
at Normandie pour
promotion
la
des
paix
droits
in
des
our
générations futures.
organization,
Il
this
est question de
connection with
savoir
Earth and
comment, dans
how,
cet
we
état
have this
de
connection
dégradation
with the
des
Earth and how's
écosystèmes, de
the
la biodiversité, du
biodiversity
climat,
and degradation of
comment
some of
protéger
the
durablement la
weather
santé,
can
que
be
ce soit la
protected
santé
somehow,
humaine
and
ou
also
non
how we
humaine.
can protect
Il faut
human
savoir que
lives,
la santé
because
chronique
of
humaine est
course
mesurée par la
health is
progression des
connected to
cancers, des maladies
the environment, and we see
neurodégénératives,
more and more diseases like
immunologiques,
cancers which are
hormonales,
developing,
des
and also
malformations et autres,
I
qui
mean,
ont
several
atteint un
issues
point
connected to
sombre qui dévaste
hormones and so
aussi
on.
les espèces humaines.
And
Il
of
y a des
course, we
issues de
have a
prise de
lot of
conscience et de
awareness in the
régénération possible. Alors, il faut savoir
among
que le message avec
audiences,
Gilles-Eric
and
Serralini,
Gilles-Eric
c'est
Serralini
aussi
also
de savoir
wants to
la
highlight,
réalité
what is
dommage
connected to
transgénérationnel,
damages
dommage
through
transespèces et
species
du
and
dommage
also through
transspatial. C'est pour ça
species.
que
This is
son
why his
expertise
expertise
concerne
is connected to
l'intérêt
public interest of
public de
humanity,
l'humanité,
of the
des
future
générations futures,
generations,
par-delà les
beyond
frontières nationales
barriers, beyond
et par-delà
frontiers,
le
and
temps
also
présent.
beyond borders.
Gilles-Éric
So
Serralini, nous avons
Gilles-Eric
l'honneur d'échanger pendant
Serralini will be with us
2
for
heures
2 hours.
en
This is a great
traduction
privilege. We
simultanée
have, of
l'anglais
course,
et
simultaneous
l'espagnol. Donc
interpretation in
j'invite les
Spanish and
participants à
English
choisir
today.
l'interprétation
So
anglais
you
ou
can, of
espagnol.
course, choose your
Et
favorite
ce
language.
webinaire est
And this
enregistré,
webinar is,
sera
of course,
publié et restera sur le
registered
site
so
internet de
that you
la
can,
chaire
of course,
d'excellence
have the
Normandie pour la
opportunity to
paix.
listen to it
Professeur,
afterwards.
j'ai l'immense
So
plaisir et l'honneur de vous donner
you
la
have the
parole.
floor,
Bienvenue
Professor,
et
and
merci
thank you so
d'être
much for
ici.
being with us. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Professor Guillard, for inviting me. This is a great pleasure to be with you for at the end of this summer, which is extremely hot. Unfortunately, I would like to share my screen if you agree. Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you. Great. So I will do my best to have full screen view here. Great. So I hope you can all see my screen. Yes, indeed. Perfect. So let's start. As said, it's a great pleasure to be here to thank you for inviting me, for having me today dealing with this specific topic, peace with biosphere. It is indeed so much important because, you know, we may have so many indications and difficulties to deal with this specific topic because we talk about war, but, you know, we sometimes and somehow forget the origins of the issues. And the origin of the issues, the roots, are connected to scientific powers, political, legal powers, which could be and can be against the understanding of these phenomena. So sometimes we have people who, you know, tell us if we have arsenic, for example, it must be forbidden. And the answer is no, just because we have, as said, political powers, which are small players, but also, you know, politicians have difficulties to handle these topics. And I have a recent example with Al Gore, the former US president, who talked about this specific aspect of lobbies in international conferences. And he said it was local, national, international. And so these lobbies are extremely important, and are they there to help? And Al Gore said no to play the role of multinationals. So this is the reason why, you know, they have so many funds. And this is incredible because these companies have so much power, money, and for 8 of them, they actually represent 60% of the GDP, global GDP. And this is huge, you know, and they have such lobbies on countries because they have, you know, they create constraints and through exchanges, for example, and I had the occasion to face several times this kind of problem. Of course, individually you can win, as the American lawyers did for big cases connected to Roundup. Roundup, the first pesticide in the world, the most important one, and also because of its expansion on all organisms, living organisms. And this is why, you know, we can switch from Antarctic to the southern part of our planet. So I mean, I don't think anyone has no trace of Roundup in his body or her body. So you see, then lobbies are there in this intent. And of course, we need to understand which are, I mean, how much harmful it is important. This is true for tobacco, for heavy metals, asbestos, and so on, and also for communication systems, mobile phones. And you see, here we actually talk about rates and levels which are decided by politicians after receiving advice by experts. And this was my case, because I had, this role for 3 mandates of 3 years, and I had this ability to give advice, as Émilie Gaillard said, to 18 ministers, to, give my expertise to them from 1998 to 2018, more or less. And there were French ministers, and I, served in the occasional international cases in India, in the Supreme Court, but also in Australia, in China, in New Zealand. And I, had to deal with this kind of situation. And you see, each time, lobbies were present in the jurisdictions, in the conflicts, and very often that creates confusion on people. And of course, also on lawyers, because they do not really understand what is right and what is false. So this is why all my work is important in this intent. So this is my purpose today, if I may. So today we have several proofs, and biosphere, as we said, we were talking about the warmth, and we're of course talking about climate here. So in these last 10 days were the warmest ever. So as for the biodiversity, we have around maybe 30 to 50% less, but at least 30% is cut back, means that the living spaces on the earth are not present anymore, not only because of overfishing or hunting, but because of pollution, just because we have all these organisms which are dead. And also, we have, so as said, in terms of grassroots levels, and of course, they are the first victims, as indigenous people, for example. We have social victims, and this is, I would like to say, connected to it, because we have issues on society and how to distribute all the wealth. So we have more than the 50% of global wealth which is not distributed properly. And today we still have conflicts between indigenous people and all the other regions and other inhabitants. For example, in Amazonia, this is the case because we have natural resources which are actually lacking. They are polluted and they are disappearing little by little. And obviously, this also means the people by themselves and human beings which are disappearing as well. And I'm not, of course, talking about the war in Ukraine. So as for the human health and the global health, I would like to say we can see this increase, which is wider and wider. And this is why here I put this baby, because I started as a biologist. I was really passionate, and I was wondering about the effects of pollution on health. This is why I wanted to start as like 0 point, to see how many pollutants were present on babies, and I had access to cords of mums, and I just tried to check they were not smoking, they were young, and so on, and also placenta. So I've been studying on several parts of the babies at birth or before birth, and so on. So fetuses, and that was really interesting. to study those genes. So I had access to these, documents, and I had the extract of DNA with the mom's consent, of course, at the beginning of the years 1990, and we had a look of pollutants on the DNA. This is a very technical method. So this method was extremely demanding. And then I've been working with several colleagues on these techniques, and we had more than 400 pollutants per cell, per fetuses. So you see, I just wondered, well, I need to, I thought I would have found less pollutants, like when you're, kissing your babies because it's a new human living, but you have so many pollutants since the beginning on the DNA of those babies. So there are pollutants on the long run. So which are these pollutants? I focused on the first 10 ones, and I found 3, which were patented by the Monsanto company. Well, at that time, I didn't have a clue about this kind, of, let's say, issue globally. They actually derive from Roundup, the most important pesticide in the world, which has been used since the 70s. And dioxin, of course, which were put inside. So Monsanto put it in the orange agent that they use in Vietnam. And that was responsible of all these, diseases in Vietnam and elsewhere as well. And we had so many cases in the US about this, terrible aspect. And the army as well had to, in a way, react to that, because they put these products on the forests to try to see Vietnamese which were hiding in the forests. And at the end of the day, they were, using it as an agent, the so-called orange agent. And it's still going on. So we have so many mutations. We find dioxin, and it is actually oil which is burnt, and you can find it on the genes of these fetuses. So in Vietnam, as said, but not only these residues were found also in several other places, and you can see that in any kind of human life. Whenever you take 1 kilogram of, human being, could be, birds or rats or whatever, babies, or the land as well. Well, you have so many living species on the land, and you will find all these residues of our industrial life, which has been, expanding after Second World War. And they were not existing at that time. They were not actually used before the World War II. So these products, start being used after the war. They can be, for example, which was used to kill in the concentration camps from Nazis, and that was used as a lethal weapon. So after the war, it was used in France, in the French field, just because we had so many cases for Nazism, and saying that, of course, that could be, if you use this product, you could kill, of course, insects, but not only. And in that sense, you have so many of these products which are in our biosphere because they're remnants, they're sustainable. And this is exactly the contrary of the sustainable, let's say, as we wish it could be today. So these products are, of course, toxic, as said, the Roundup residues, And I will come back to that afterwards. And dioxins, obviously. So the third one was PCBs. So actually, they're residues which would allow to create plastics in the whole, if you buy something, you would then throw plastics, and also, papers, which are inside as packaging. You have PCBs in all these packaging. So newspapers, but also, dairy products and so on. And so we were trying to use, several kind of papers which would try to be like easier to be used and waterproof as well. For example, without too much ink, and these are PCBs. These are exactly which would enable, the producers not to have these issues with papers. But not only, also the components inside computers, inside our wires at home, and of course they have isolants. So you see, we can, find them everywhere in our everyday life. And the most stupid thing is the fact that they didn't think of how they could be recycled. You see, I mean, they could have, thought that like obliging this opportunity to recycle them since the 60s or 70s, but Monsanto company just were mobilized because they had this patent on PCBs and they didn't want it to be. So in order to do so, what did they do? They tried to find scientists which were corrupted, and this does exist, unfortunately, and they would hide the toxicity of these products, of these methods. And this happens, unfortunately. So whenever you have to evaluate the toxicology of one product, well, at that time we didn't have so much expertise on these techniques, on these procedures. So unfortunately, we had all these products put on the market. So you see, they came everywhere in our lives, at home, in the malls, in the shopping centers, everywhere, in the, of course, environment and so on. So you see, it's really inside, connected to all these cells since the babies. We have, since we are born, PCBs all in our body. So not only in human beings, and that contributes a lot to create issues with the biosphere, to have more toxicity in biosphere. This is why I created this association, Toxic Secret. This is my website. So we do not see the professor's slide. We're still on the third page. Right. So that was an example of oil and pesticides and the Roundup. And I would also like to talk about GMOs and other pesticides. So this is my website here. This website is translated, and this allows us to see how many associations, actually 80 associations, which have, pooled and been working together in order to deal with these Roundup and pesticides, but not only, also to talk about, corruption, dishonesty, and so on of the companies, but not only. You see, we need to be extremely precise also with the law. Law is not always fulfilled. So on these babies' genes, we can find the, for example, engine gas residues, as said, and it's true, we have it, but we also have dioxins from oil, which is burnt, or plastic, which is burnt, and By the way, my website is www.secretstoxic.com. So you have industrial residues, dioxins, and others. So since 1984, I just, wanted to deal with the effects of food pollution on health. This is why I made my first research. Then in 1991, I became professor, and I was 30, and I started teaching GMOs. So, at that time, in 1991, I, asked for the GMO validation files. They were refused on the grounds of industrial secrecy. And that was really incredible. That was 1993. This is exactly what happened. And then in 1998, I became advisor for ministers, I said, 18 ministers. So little by little, I was giving advice to the Minister of the Environment, of Agriculture at that time. And I was really involved, with all these activities of research, but I was still teaching, obviously. And then in 2005, I made my first study, which was, showing the toxicity of Roundup in human cells, whereas glyphosate is almost harmless in these cells. So I was advisor, and I asked ministers to, to dwell on that. But for such a long time, people were just, not asking my purposes, and it was not working. So this is why I made, at the end of the day, my first research and all these, lacking information. And I made the in vivo one, which is the final step, as you may know, and following the multinational standards. And then little by little, I noticed that not only firms were not doing that with their products, but they were hiding, really hiding, the facts, like the active principles. And that was representing for Roundup only 14% of glyphosate. So you see, they only made tests with glyphosate, which means one part of the product they would diffuse and trade. So this is why I was the first to do this kind of study, and I continued to ask, and also about GMOs. And then in 2012, I just ended my study, and I had an international crowdfunding. And together with, people who wanted to support me and accepted to support me, I published it. So Monsanto and public administrations in the US were a bit reluctant, because they actually, they were against that. And instead of just, banning the product, they just said I was, wrong. So, and in order to have the whole world aware of the situation, and not hiding it, what did I do then? I made, of course, these cases for defamation, and as Emily said, I made 5 cases, and I still have one on the 1st of September. And I will come back to, these, let's say, specificities later on. So in this whole process, I just continued. It was for me obvious to ask for public data of toxicology to show, they were not sufficient, not enough. And at the end of the day, what happened in the US, just because we had lawyers which were in favor of people and defending people which suffered from cancers. And in fact, Miss Dewar Jansen, for example, who was a gardener, well, they just, mobilized, and they wondered how to prove that this product was, not appropriate. So of course, we need tests, and this is such, it takes such a long time and a lot of money too. So instead of continuing that, they were asking for their studies. So of course, they didn't get into detail. They just asked for, anything they had, all the documentation. So this already happened, by the way, for several other cases. And we have for pants, for example, for PCBs and so on. So not only that was done, but also journalists. And this is really incredible on a legal point of view. They had 3 million patches. So from the Monsanto company. And also they brought, a lot of excuses and
So
mail
all the emails, all the data were all mixed
really
up,
terrible.
believing no one would look into details. But this is the time, the era of computerizing. So everything was computerized. And that's when we realized that my name was quoted about 50,000 times. Sometimes they give me different names. They call me all kinds of names. You see, bad names. By accessing their data, I realized that what their strategy was all about. They don't make room for accident, for hazard. Political men and women, when it comes to judicial actions, international commissions, committees, people are ready to pay, to fraud, to pay scientists. As a famous one, Henri Miller, not the actor. He was filmed during the Envoyé Spécial documentary, and he's doing ghostwriting. So Monsanto writes to him and writes their own article, and then he makes them published through some magazines and newspapers. In that way, the firm does not sign, of course, in their own name. Otherwise, it would be said that they have done a good job, they have a good product. People may not believe them, and maybe people check that, but it wouldn't seem it would seem natural. But no, they don't do that actually. They ask scientists, political people to do it on their behalf. So they never actually show up in public or even through their writings, but they write articles under the names of the other people, like Henri Miller, for example. In the Forbes magazine, there were articles against me. For example, this is a magazine for billionaires. They influence people's opinion, people who have money, and mainly large companies which are in charge of pension funds. Of course, this is going through public funds. So in these commissions, they manage pension funds, but they fraud and they tell lies. So what happens for human beings? Since the 1950s, human beings are suffering from hormone diseases, nervous diseases. People die of this in almost every family. You have nervous diseases, hormone diseases. And there's a diminution also of sperm and fertility and malformations. You see an increase of cancers, of immune diseases. Emily said it in her introduction. And as you can see, there is no scales. It would be too difficult to put it on scale for the different diseases, but we cannot deny these facts. When you take the diseases one by one, which is what they did, they would say, look, for cancer, it's tobacco, it's the use of tobacco, but they don't say that the Henri Miller was actually at the head of a commission that allowed a number of cancerous agents in tobacco, and that natural tobacco is less toxic, less dangerous than tobacco that you have in your cigarettes, in your pockets, which is cancerous because of the added agents. So it's a bit like with pesticides, which have petroleum. These are preservatives, and they are toxic for life, but yet they will preserve the products. So these products are very spread in the plastic, for example, and all over the world. Detergents or petroleum residues. So you also have heavy metals in those products. So just to give you an example, the POAS, these are adjuvants in the Roundups, non-declared products, which are included in the Roundup. So in 2020, Donna Farmer, who was in charge of the toxicology of Monsanto, which commercialized the Roundup, the product that was accused in the various trials in the US concerning about 100,000 people. Apparently, Monsanto paid 10 billion, but this was nothing for them because they had much bigger and larger subsidies. So the technician or the head of toxicology at Monsanto said was that the interesting point is that glyphosate alone does not have the effects of the formulated product, that is, of the Roundup. And this actually shows a role of the co-formulants, that is, the hidden agents or products, or this overfactant. So Donna Farmer said that, and the response was from Hayden's, we are doing pretty good with glyphosate, but vulnerable with the surfactants. They knew that this was cancerous already in 2002. Glyphosate is okay, but the formulated product, that is, a product such as they are used by the farmers, these can cause damages. And if you read further down, or if you look further, you can see that it has to do with DNA. So with the Monsanto papers, on top of the 56,000 quotes that explained how they fought against me, one may think that I'm a unique case, but no, this is not the case. All scientists who find issues or problems with the products, be it them or other multi-companies, multinationals, I strongly believe that one of the solutions today would be simply to ban companies after a certain size, over a size of a nation state, to ban groupings also. But I don't think we would have enough political power to do that. But if we could, we would have a better control of large companies. But that's not the only solution. We need to demand transparency. For example, I only learned about this in 2016 when I asked for the Monsanto papers with the American lawyers. I asked for the secret data of the Monsanto company. I only found out about this in 2016 because all the data were confidential and private. And even today, when a new product is commercialized, the data remains confidential. Why? Earlier on, I talked about the Second World War. There were a large consortium, people were saying no longer any world war, etc., etc. But firms, companies, and states said, no, we will take the test. We will run the test for you to test the products. You don't have the money. That's what they said to the states. This is our job to do this. So the states were saying, well, it's not up to us to control products. It's up to you to do it. So they said, okay, but it will have to remain confidential, because if another company was to start, they would use our results, our tests, to have the patent for the same products. Of course, this was false because they had protection for this, but that's what they said. They gave a lie to maintain the secrecy and the privacy, confidentiality for PCB, for dioxide, for pesticides, for Roundup, and all the other pesticides on the planet. And that is absolutely abnormal. Lawyers very often don't realize that this is detrimental because of the secrecy or the company secrets. Then we use these tests of toxicology. It's not so much if they were to be made public. Now all the scientists could just have access to this. Now we come up with some toxicology tests just for the sake of data. For people, for students, for example, to train on statistics. We have enough products in the world. You could just take any product on the internet. No, these products are protected by 1,000 keys, secret codes, which are only available for a small number of experts. For example, Roundup, to give you an example, glyphosate was authorized in 1973. And then the international commissions, there aren't that many, trust one another. They don't have a lot of means. They can't control the tests. It's costly. For example, 3-4 million euros per product to run these tests. So people don't do it simply. And that's not normal. Not only that, but companies decided that it would remain confidential because political people also need those companies and need their money to get elected and re-elected, etc., etc. So I was totally innocent about this. Since 2005, I published a number of articles in scientific magazines to show and to prove the toxicity of these products. Here you have the list here to your left. And in the Monsanto papers, I found out how they would do it. They would try to postpone my publications. They would try to ask reviewers to review my work or to compensate the loss. It's not very profitable for scientific papers or journals, so they would compensate, and then they would have access to those reviewers, to readers, if you like. So they place their own reviewers or rereaders who play innocent, they play scientific. Often these are real scientists who were members of commissions before, so you end up with conflicts of interest. But we know who they are now. They're often the same people. So I have studied this in details. I've studied the action mechanism of these products, and I understood what they do. For example, this was the first article which I published in 2005, in which we found reactions of Monsanto in the papers. So the journal, it was a good journal that published this article, asked me to stop publishing because it caused them a lot of problems, political, financial issues, when they agreed to publish my articles. Mainly because they had a lot of pressure from the lobbies. So the company actually looked at my article to postpone the publication as much as possible, but yet we managed to publish it with a lot of difficulties. So we were able to break out their strategy throughout the years. And it goes through an essential point, and that is to maintain public confusion at all levels, state level, ministerial level, people level, between glyphosate and Roundup. They even end up calling Roundup or weed killers, they call them glyphosate. Just to give you an example, there's more than 800 formulations or types of different bottles and containers in different countries of Roundup. And in South America, some are called glyphosato, which is very confusing because all the Americans from the South are actually sick because of the spreading of this product through helicopters in the fields, because that's the main pesticide for GMO soya in the concentration camps, which are intensive breeding camps. So we find, for example, Roundup in the chicken flesh, and they fight to pretend it is glyphosate. At first, they even had the patent for glyphosate as a detergent. So they just simply cause confusion. And even today, people talk about glyphosate as a weed killer. Glyphosate, weed killer, but that's over now. Even today, Mr. Macron talks about the renewal of the weed killer glyphosate. But actually, it's only 40% of what's in the Roundup, but everything else is not good. You have arsenic, you have different products, but this is not declared. Not only the firm, the companies advocated to have this secrecy of what they do, to keep the secrecy of what they do. There's a list of things to do, but the results of the details, we don't get them. And yet the companies want to maintain part of the secrecy regarding the components of the products, such as Coca-Cola. They say this is a secret recipe. And because of these secrets, double or triple secrets, we never really know how it works and what is the level of toxicity. There are many publications now which show the side effects in the human beings, on animals, on different species, which are very serious. So Monsanto fought hard, and they fight because I was able to pinpoint the difference between glyphosate and Roundup and the confusion that they maintain. I did not know that at the time, only found out later on. So it was a surprise for me. So I saw that glyphosate, this is in blue, the blue curve, that Roundup was much more toxic, 100,000 times more. It's never used, glyphosate is never used alone. So Roundup is up to 100,000 times more toxic than glyphosate alone. And I tested this in different cells, including baby cells, fetuses cells. So I thought to myself, if it's not glyphosate that is responsible for this, what is it? So I studied this all the way through to find out what was the agent responsible for this. So Monsanto said, Monsanto declares that glyphosate is a main active agent. And when you keep repeating that, then it's playing their game, because they are the only one checking this. But we have actually discovered now what is Roundup made up of despite glyphosate? So Roundup is much more toxic than glyphosate, 100,000 times more, depending on the types of cells and models and versions. So what we have found are petroleum residues and heavy metals like arsenic, totally forbidden. There's also water in the 40% left. You have detergents to mix it all. That's their secret, their professional secret. So when scientists wonder what would be the proof that diseases come from the pollution, they talk about epidemiology. Of course, when there are cancers, for example, like with the garden, the case of the gardener who was using Roundup, that's why the American lawyers won the case. But the main lawyer of the firm who won the case started his conference by saying that glyphosate, what's that? What's that? A bit like you say with Nescafe. But what else? What else, rather? That's what it meant. So we proved that the labeling was not right because it was not fully describing the ingredients and that it was causing cancers. This was only done step by step. That's why Monsanto and Bayer had to pay 10 billion to 100,000 patients, and it's not over. There are more patients still, people who got sick. So epidemiology is often used, but it's not valid for individual cases, and epidemiology is not sufficient. Because you are exposed to a whole range of polluting products and you have to find one person in charge. This is a principle that one dose makes poison. There's one that is more toxic than the others among all. And when you mix toxic products, actually, no, it's not the case. Glyphosate actually is less toxic than arsenic or petroleum residues, but it's mixed, which, of course, increases the level of toxicity. But it is not known as such, because in order to commercialize the product, Monsanto tested glyphosate alone, purified, and that's a fraud, you see. And they gave the results of the test to the scientists, to the various commissions, to the states, to the nations. But of course, there will be a debate. Yes, but one might say, I've seen this effect on insects, on people, or whatever. But Monsanto would say, no, look at the test. That's not true. It must be something else. Except that they don't say that the other thing is actually what they put there themselves. So why are they including other products, other stuff there? I'm going to reveal things to you little by little. These are petroleum residues, and these companies who do that are working hand in hand with the petroleum or the oil companies. Al Gore, you would find this on the internet. Al Gore explained the lobbying, how they go to conferences, international conferences, and these people, it's a kind of a fraud, a mixer of political, scientific, and judicial forces which are against the biosphere. The good news, however, is that we could have a much healthier life, not with intensive farming like we have. which is responsible by 30% during the IPCC conference. It said that it is responsible for a lot of the climate changes. We use a lot of oil in the big soya fields because that's a system of economic exchanges. So economy is based on petroleum, on oil, on energy, companies with a car, etc., and food as well, because farming and the big oil fields and soya fields or corn fields are irrigated with petroleum in the pesticides, and also the trucks, the tractors that spread, or the plane or the aircraft sometimes that spread the pesticides over these fields. So we are now able to know, to find out what's happening, and we have some proof, some evidence. So we decided to have we all agreed to say we need to have a precaution principle, but we're far from it. We have all the elements, we have all the solutions on the one hand, but our economic, scientific, judicial systems are only serving a minority of multinationals, serving their own interests. So it's going to be actually very difficult. We do have means, however, to put our foot between the door to stop this system, because we know we have enough papers, enough evidence nowadays throughout the world. Monsanto papers is, of course, the biggest cases of all, but there are many others that show how they fraud, how they act. That's why the 10 billion that were paid by Monsanto was because a fraud was highlighted, was put forward, and yet they continue to deny it. So one may ask, what would be an evidence of an environmental pathology to understand what are the biochemicals mechanism and the effects on cells, on lab animals, on the wild animals, on human cases, like Johnson and the other 100,000 patients in the case of Roundup. So I've analyzed all these products in the best way possible, which is what we call mass spectrometry, where you analyze all the molecules. And what you see here so every vertical line represents a mixture of about anything. But we were able to identify this anything. So they actually have garbage, petroleum garbage in there. It's not a very specific mixture, if you like. The whole time, we distillate petroleum for engines. And here on these lines, you have intermediate products as well, or residue products. They would say that the benefit is at the bottom of the cart. So they commercialize those products. They have different mixture of oil products with very good detergent effects, actually even used in cosmetics. And so women actually put that on their faces, on their lips for decades. Biodegradable, non-biodegradable, but yet there are now biodegradable products. So because these products, just like the PCB, were authorized one day by a commission. So for Monsanto, there were trials also. But the frauds were proven. They even invented, they changed things in the test results. Firms are responsible, companies are responsible for the tests that they should produce or show, but they don't say it. There's someone from the toxicology department actually that was sent to jail because they worked for that lab doing the test for the PCB, and he went to prison because he admitted lying.
Si la petite commission en question dans le pays, aux États-Unis, dit ah ben le produit présente aucun risque, eh ben, il n'y aura jamais de recyclage, il n'y aura jamais d'imposition de faire attention à l'utilisation du produit, de mettre ni un masque ni des gants au début. Et malgré le fait qu'il y ait des firmes de gens qui ont des cancers,
despite having people and companies producing this, like of course Monsanto and so on, so not putting gloves and masks and so on, we have of course the secret, the secrecy of that. So we are in a vicious circle and system, I would say. So the people say, we didn't see we had these results coming from oil. And Monsanto is not talking about it because they admitted since the war, you know, mobile was existing at that time, and they also, you know, decided for weapons, for toxical and chemicals and so on. So the association between Bayer and Monsanto was already existing, and this association was, you know, including them to make tests and to also explain the results, of course. And we had all the Nazis which were present, and they were, you know, vicious and perverse about that. So this is the result we obtained. We have these formulants, Monsanto will call them adjuvants or core dilutants, and you know, formules, thinners, dispersants, emulsifier, humectants, wetting agents, surfactants, and so on. But at the end of the day, it is the dilution of oil which will allow this, you know, formula, and you will glyphosate be diluted and so on. And it's not actually, it's about the penetration of cells, and the product is actually penetrating very well, even if we do not have those adjuvants. So these are technical names which are used to, you know, define them. So we realized that these formulants, and this also came from the American agency, they're never tested by themselves. I mean, so the companies and the firms will also put it together with the pesticides, and that will not be tested, while you will have the purified glyphosate tests done, saying, okay, you see, we do not have anything. So the commission will actually advocate for the product to be traded, to be used, and you will not, you know, they will not highlight issues, and then politicians will believe that and say, yeah, of course, this is safe. So you see, they're actually repeating what firms say, what companies say, and all these, of course, industrial secrecy connected to that, while all the, as said, studies and so on show the contrary. Another example here that we find in the Monsanto papers, it's the so-called, it is the number of the Monsanto paper. So this is the name, alkylamidomidethylpropylamine, right? So it is well known to be toxic for children, and you know, Monsanto knew it since 1999, and this is what happens. Because it's, you know, covered by the secrecy, and that has been revealed in the Monsanto papers, while, you know, they knew it since 1999 that it was toxic to children. But this is true also for other pesticides, and I went, you know, checking that. So we talk about the product against bees, killing bees, for example, neurotoxics, for example. Not only, we talk about fungicides, for example. And the formula, which means the product which is obtained, is not a drug. It is a product which will be even more toxic than the active principle. Imagine that. So that will allow, of course, diluate, but not only to have more toxicity. And that will be shown here. You see the difference. This is the product. This is the Monsanto Roundup. You see right here, the curve is true, so no toxicity is shown. And then the red one, the red curve, is the product as it is, let's say, sold, and how it is on the market. And that has never been tested as it is. So the good news is that the law, the Supreme, the Court of Justice in Europe, we have a lawyer which actually, you know, told it, you need to test them. He asked for tests as the product is in the bottle. So not glyphosate, not the glyphosate, but the product which will be used, which means Roundup. So, and this, of course, is not fulfilled by the agencies. So what am I telling you here? That the national agencies do not have any power, and they do not ask for anything. They do not ask to test the product entirely. This is why we have 80 associations all over the world which are in favor of that request of secrecy, toxic secrecy. So for a lot of pesticides, this is true, and it is written in the law interpreted by the European Court of Justice. Guillaume, who is the lawyer, told it, but it's not done. It's not applied. Products are, you know, circulating. Why? Because the agency or Monsanto will tell you, I have more than 450 products. I cannot test all of them. It's too expensive. It's just impossible. I will only test glyphosate. So you see, this is the fraud. This is exactly where the fraud comes from. So they should actually test all these ones, and if the tests are okay, then they will, you know, go forward. And this is not what is done. No one is asking for these tests. People are not courageous enough. One of the ministers I worked with, Nicolas Hulot, former Minister of the Environment in France, he was working together with the French government, and he didn't, you know, stay for a long time because they just published files at that time on him, and he just stopped his career. But, well, he discovered several things, not only this point, but several others, so he had to quit. Anyways, the Confidor, which is also a weed which is insecticide, sorry. So it's neonicotinoids as well, and the product is the red one is extremely more toxic. You see that much more, 13,000 times more toxic. This is huge, and it is not the product which is tested. So we have discovered how to process. This is why I called this conference the political powers or scientific and legal powers against, just because they pay, lawyers to fight for their causes. They just, they just do not want any information to be diffused and tests to be done. So they do not have enough information. And also in the juridical, political powers and forces, this is exactly what happens. And whenever you have a law, it should be for a general interest, but beyond the applications, it's not really the case. Right. So we must really pay a lot of attention to that. And I was victim of this. I actually republished a study about the long-term toxicity of Roundup herbicide and Roundup tolerant genetically modified maize. So the responsible, the manager which was involved in the Monsanto papers, and he said he was independent, by the way, which he was not, obviously. He just did not want to see my study, did not want to publish it, and then we republished it elsewhere. So we get exactly to what we want on a scientific point of view, but it's so much confusing. So for the public opinion, it's so difficult to understand something. These are the cancers you have with GMOs or Roundups, which are at the end of the day a sponge for Roundup. They're just genetically modified, but we do not know enough about them. And 99% of them have inside Roundup or any kind of other pesticides, and we know we have so few information about that, and then they want to, of course, diffuse the Roundup through these fraud and lies. So we also discovered in that fight we wanted to know what are these products which are the endocrine disruptors, so-called endocrine disruptors products. So the American agency made a list of 177 endocrine disruptors, and in that list, they listed all these products. So I had a look at that through a publication, several publications actually. Amongst those publications, their properties, and I discovered they're all actually nervous. Not only endocrine, but also nervous disruptors. So they actually can, alter the nervous system, create Parkinson's disease, and so on. And that, as you know, was not the case beforehand in the past. So these products are spams, so-called. You know what a spam is in a computer. It gives, the system to be heavier. This is the same here. You create electrical or chemical communication, which are heavier, and you will have a lot of interferences between them, so you will be ill. Of course, it's not immediate. Of course, it's not the day after that you will catch a cancer, but it's on let's say 10 years time length. So if it's through a hamburger or chicken or bread, having soya, and so on. And you have also wheat, which contains Roundup, chicken, and so on, in all cereals. And it is given to chicken, to get bigger. So that will have an impact on your nervous system. And this is, of course, created little by little. But when you go and see a doctor, is not able to define why you have a Parkinson's or breast cancer. No doctor is, able to define it just because we have epidemiology on one side, and then these products were authorized at large scales, thousands of tons in the whole world, and we do not have any transparency about their tests and trading tests, commercializing tests, because we would have asked for recycling, we would have asked for, studies about the risks, and now it is too late. Let's have a look now at the arsenic in red. It's huge, really, and it's very well known to create cancer and be toxic. You have it everywhere. They do not declare it. This is the main fraud. So we can limit the understanding, let's say legally, let's say they didn't put any information on the label, or they committed a fraud because they didn't declare everything, you see, and they didn't declare the whole thing about toxicity. Now, what I discovered was published in 2022 in a scientific magazine. We had oil in all pesticides. And imagine that we made that study with, several pesticides, and we discovered that we have, residues of oil inside. Look at all these colors. I don't know if you can see my slide here and the arrow. You see all these colors? They're all oil residues from different kinds and so on. And in black, you see the hidden part, and people talk about it. So could be the, public opinion, or scientists or politicians, they talk about this issue, glyphosate, or, all these elements here. But we have so many not declared or non-declared products inside the iceberg. So we just showed that it was depending, and we demonstrated that in the several products in question, they were all different. They had a different composition. Imagine that. So we could even not imagine a standard composition or official one for a pesticide, just because the hidden part is just, changing according to these oil effects. So this is crazy, and this is exactly what happens all over the world whenever these products are available. And we highlighted here the so-called fractioning tower, and this is part of my last publication. And we have these intermediates of oil. So it could be refinery gas or gasoline used in cars, or naphtha used in chemicals, or kerosene, jet fuels, diesel for trucks, or lubricants for oil for cars, and fuel oil for ships, and residue used to make asphalt, and so on. So you see, it will get into pesticides and everywhere. So you will have, of course, profits on the whole column, distillation, so-called fractionating tower in English. So for the GMOs, this is the same thing. We just modified plants, and this is quite scary, but this is what happened. We put oil to be able to have pesticides inside, and people do not know that. So it's the whole system. it is so much confusing. People don't understand a world. People don't understand that GMOs are done and are creating to use more and more pesticides. And these GMOs are full pesticides since their creation. And I was part of the, commissions of GMOs, and I was, I could witness that. And you have people who, fought not to have any GMOs all over the world. So I actually, of course, talked about conflicts of interest, confidentiality, censorship, in health risk assessment. And my study on rats showed this mechanism. So the stress on cells and genes is extremely toxic. And here, for example, you see the Roundup, the real one, I mean, the one which is used by the farmers, the cancers which can occur here. And they're increasing, little by little. On rat, for example, it will, as you see here, increase. This is the red curve. And this is the, life length of a rat. So lobbies are absolutely, saying, well, you have, rats suffering. It's not the right species of rats. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. But that allowed us to create enough confusion, not to understand, not to have the populations understand what really happens in these cases. And that was republished, as said.
These are the American lawyers in 2018 and 2019 with the Monsanto papers. And they met the Canadian Parliament. You have Brent Wisner here, who said, well, what else? What else do you have there other than glyphosate? What else in there? And then you have the head of the cabinet, Michael Baum. They paid the trip for me, but they didn't make me a billionaire. I had to collect some money to pay my lawyers for the next trials in France. They could not deal with my case or in the US because I'm a French researcher, and that's a pity. They couldn't take me on board because of all the legal details. So this is 2019. Michael Baum, and I put them in touch with the lawyers at Guillaume Tumrel, who won the case at the European Court of Justice, who said, yes, pesticides have to be analyzed and evaluated in the long run. This is what the ECG said. When we hear pesticide, we don't hear glyphosate, we hear the combined or the mixed product that are sold to farmers, but this has not been done. And this is what the association has been asking for, at least asking for transparency to confront the fraud that has been proven. So these are the books where I'm explaining everything I'm saying. This has been translated. The Robert Kennedy, the son or brother rather of the president that was assassinated, he spoke of me as a heroic toxicologist who helped to bring Monsanto to justice. That was his foreword. So I wrote this book with Jérôme Douzelet. It was translated in German, also in Spanish. So I wrote other books as well, and I'm just about to conclude now. Emilie, I will conclude now. I also spoke about cooking and eating well and the perversions behind all of this in the organic products. Of course, less petroleum, less pesticides, but you find a lot in cheeses, but also in meat. It takes a lot of meat. For a cow, for example, it takes a lot of grass, so therefore a lot of treatments and products. When we give them grass and hay with weed killers that have been used. So the consumption of these products, when you buy an industrial product in a supermarket at a low price, it hides something behind, a philosophy of the world. So every product actually hides a philosophy, a worldview. I've seen lobbying which are so strong, so powerful in the life of experts, of researchers, and in regular lives. There are impacts. So I'm also explaining that there are things that we can do, like cooking with good products, with organic products, and you would find a wonderful taste to your ingredient. This is a book in French on Roundup. We won 7 cases, 7 trials for defamation against these lobbies, and we still have 3 running, and next one is September 1st. But I have found some hope in this. What could we do? Individually speaking, yes, we eat this, maybe we should start eating organic food as much as possible. We don't care about the label, but we want to eat good food, something that has not been treated with products. If it's something from your garden, organic is simply a label to commercialize at a larger scale, but if it comes from your garden, it's good. But we've come to realize how can we detoxify ourselves from all these toxicities? There are legal answers, legal solutions like transparency, require for legal text. All this seems to be a bit too far, but yet there are also biological solutions, I would say. For example, you start from the conclusion that there are many, many microbes. We've all heard about microbiota, which enable us to have good digestion, but we realize that microbes help us digest. And it's not by accident. It's not just a hub of bacteria that causes diseases. It's something that actually helps us to live, to stimulate our immune system, our nervous system, simply because it's a symbiose. There are more cells in us than human cells, 100 times more in our intestine. It's huge. Therefore, we are an ecosystem. We are an ecosystem. If we are to protect the ecosystem, it's for us, it's for our own bodies. And it's the only richness and the only wealth that we can leave behind to our children. It's the only wealth that we can leave. It's our ecosystem. No child can survive in the desert. If we make the earth a desert, everyone would die. There is a circle of relationships. So with these microbes, we have associated ourselves, we've made a symbiose, and they help us to digest. And they simplify, they break down food. Without them, our intestine could not digest. So in this, we have discovered the incomparable role of mushrooms, which are not bacteria, micro mushrooms, which we call fungum. These are yeasts which coordinate. We see the bacteria all around the yeast. A yeast is a bit like a human cell. It's quite big. And bacteria are way smaller. They're on the surface of these micro mushrooms, which are in us, that help us to detoxify and the yeast coordinate their action. I'm not going to give you a science class now on yeast. I could do this on another occasion. But I have written, for those that might be interested in this, I have written something on the gut fungiome. Microbiota was discovered in the year 2000, and the gut fungiomes were discovered. We were not using the right equipment to discover this before. And it's only since the year 2020 that we've discovered this more clearly. When you bake a cake, you use a bit of yeast. When you make dough or bread, it's only a little bit of it. But we've discovered hundreds in our intestine, so hundreds which are doing good, and we are producing aromas. Aromas is also has to do with breathing, and they will stimulate this detoxification. They can actually digest the polluting agents, but we have less of these because biodiversity is going down, and because pesticides have killed a lot of the biodiversity. A few of them still know how to digest things. So people have got some digestion issues, they've got some stomach issues. Even if they take a tablet or something, if they take probiotics or yeast, etc., still there is not enough compared to what exists naturally. So things that we have associated since prehistory, which is why we have become people who can eat just about anything. Opposite political forces now. As I said, I was an advisor to ministers, French ministers. Unfortunately, the favorable forces are going down, are losing ground, and there are many opposite forces who are going, for example, talk about glyphosate. And with those EU MPs, a lot of them are not aware of this. They don't have the time, they don't take the time to study these topics. It's a bit similar with international authorities in Canada, in Africa, in Sweden, where I went, etc., China. The last minister that I was counseling was Nicolas Hulot, who was then fired. I'm not saying he was innocent about this, I don't know. But unfortunately, people fire the ones that they don't want to keep very easily and quickly. Emmanuel Macron, or Nicolas Hulot rather, said to Mr. Macron and Madame Merkel, Mrs. Merkel in Germany, it was not the right moment to say that Roundup had petroleum residues, and they preferred to fire Nicolas Hulot at the time when he suggested that Bayer should buy Monsanto. It wasn't just that, I'm just summing up here. But they came up with something, some sad. Most likely he was a womanizer still, but there was something else behind. There was another issue behind this. But since 2019, there's not been any trials, etc. So the decree from the European Court of Justice in 2019 was very important. The Blaise bill, they said, okay, we read it very carefully. Pesticides have to be analyzed in all of their components. And they did confess that it has never been done since 1950, which is not normal, meaning that the agencies don't do their job properly because they're delegated to the pesticides companies, which do nothing. I was an expert for these agencies, so I know very well. And I keep telling them, you don't do your job properly. You are just hiding the fraud there. Those who know about this are not very many. Many of them are not aware of this. Those who work, it's a bit like everything else, really. That's it. I'm done. Emily, I wanted to thank you for your attention. Our website, you can find on my website for free all the information, all the publications, scientific publications that I mentioned today and other things. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gilles-Eric Serralini, for this presentation. It was so good to have the time, to take the time to talk about this complex topic.